Hi everyone, this is Elias Martin from collectingjapaneseprints.com. It's Woodblock Wednesday, where every Wednesday at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time, we get together and discuss Japanese prints and paintings. Today is actually an interesting topic because we're going to discuss an artist who did some woodblock prints, but is most known for lithography. And his name is Oda Kazuma, and he was considered the premier lithographer. He didn't start lithography in Japan, but he did popularize it, and he's an interesting artist. He was one of those artists that was working in the early part of the 20th century, and he straddled two genres. He was a Sosaku-hanga artist, participated in several Sosaku-hanga organizations, but he also was a Shinhanga artist. Well, I won't call him a Shinhanga artist, but he worked in the Shinhanga tradition. He was hired by Watanabe, produced some designs for him, and Watanabe's workshop actually produced the prints. So I have a collection today of prints from Oda Kazuma that represent a little bit of it showcases his entire body of work. It just one example from different types of work that he produced. So let's have a look and let's go to the table. So the first work I want to discuss, and it's not the earliest work here at the table, but I think I'll start with the Shinhanga prints first. And this is a very rare trial impression of the design is known as Catching White Baits. It is from it's 1924 is when the design was published. But this design is a different coloration that you might be used to. I actually had one about a year ago, and if you're interested in seeing the design in the regular coloration, go to my website, collectingjapaneseprints.com, and then click on the archive section and you'll get to see. But this impression isn't printed with a very dark blue coloration. It's actually lighter. There's different kinds of blues with purples, and the sky is not as dark as well. So I'm going to zoom in so you could see. Besides it being a very rare trial impression, it actually might even be unique. The print is a woodblock print, and it was published by Watanabe, and it was done as part of the prints that Watanabe was producing in the mid 20th century. I mean, actually, this is 1924, so the mid 20s. And so it's an example of Oda Kazuma working in the Shinhanga style. And his Shinhanga prints are more simplified, and they read kind of like Hasui's or Koetsu's or other Shinhanga artists working at the period. So they're not as detailed. They're much more conceptual in the sense that it's a beautiful landscape with a figure and on a boat, and you have the sea and then the mountains overhead. So, I'm going to zoom in so you could see this very rare impression. The other work that I have out here on the table is a very rare watercolor. It's a watercolor for a design, for a woodblock printed design that was done at around the same time, no later than the 1930s, but it was about 1930. And this is sort of the way most Shinhanga artists worked, like Hasui. Hasui was hired by Watanabe, and Hasui went out and sketched out a design, and then he either made a watercolor of it out in the field or at home, and basically gave the watercolor to Watanabe. And Watanabe sort of made some corrections or suggested some things. And it was sort of a collaborative process because the block carvers and printers then were hired to produce the design. And here, I'll zoom in so you could see there's a quick pencil work underneath, and then the watercolor over the pencil. Now, this design as a watercolor reflects a woodblock print, or a design for a woodblock print, but it's actually an interesting design because it's, for Oda Kazuma or even for Watanabe, is a little bit of an anomaly in his woodblock prints, because this design really showcases the urban or the urbanization of Tokyo, and you see these taller buildings and the smokestacks in the background. Here you see maybe a factory with some more smokestacks, and so this design isn't a quaint landscape design that sort of idealizes Japan or a scene in Japan, or something that one would just call aesthetically beautiful and charming. Although I really do love this design and I think it's beautiful in its own way, it's very different from this style work that was produced for Watanabe. So here you see a bit of a departure from that style that is much more decorative. And it's really much more rooted in the reality of the everyday for the artist. So I think it's neat to be able to see a very rare original woodblock print trial. And this is an extraordinarily rare watercolor for Oda Kazuma. It's in fact the only watercolor I've ever seen by this artist that depicts a design that he produced. But the next print I want to discuss is a very rare wood engraving. It's quite large, actually. It's larger than Oban. So I will, if I could pull this Oban size print, you could see that it's much larger than the standard size Oban. And basically this print depicts a mountain either in moonlight or at dawn. And basically this print is a wood engraving, so it's actually rather large for a wood engraving. Usually wood engraving designs are much smaller. And a wood engraving is different from a regular wood block because they use the end grain of the block so that it's much tighter and you can carve very intricate lines like you see here. It actually also reads almost like a copper plate. But in this particular case, it's a wood engraving. He went on to produce lithography using copper plates. So it's interesting here that he's experimenting. This is a really early work for 1918. It's a design you just don't see. And it's pre-earthquake as well, so it also survived the earthquake in Tokyo. So it's actually extraordinarily rare. I've never seen this design in person. I've only seen it in reference books. And one thing I should point out, which is kind of neat, so if we look at the print, you see his signature, OK. And, at first blush, you might think OK meaning OK, but it's actually his initials, and you only see his initials on prints of this really early period when he's doing this himself, sort of working on designs in his home, really. At this point, he hadn't yet become a professional printmaker, and this is something that he was doing for exhibitions and for group organizations, but not necessarily professionally. So I'm going to zoom in so you could see the detail. It's quite beautiful. So now I'll move on to a work that is much more typical of what we have come to expect of Oda Kazuma. This is a typical litho that was done in 1929. See his signature and the date there. And this belongs to a series of prints of Tokyo that depict the sort of the new urban city that has emerged over the last 10, 15 years. And here it's a night scene with rain coming in at an angle, and you'll see all the shops are lit up. And this location is actually Ginza. So it's an entertainment district. It's also a shopping district. And we know this because I actually have the original folder that the print came in. And in the folder, you see the title Ginza. You see the department stores in the background. There's a martini glass here and here. And that kind of looks like cherries. And then there's a guitar in the background. So it's very, very festive. And this definitely gives you a sense of, Ginza being such a hot nightlife center. And, just kind of to flip over the original folder so I could show you that the print was released and put into this folder in that way. So it's great to have the original folder that the artist himself designed. And it's also interesting to see the style in which the artist designed the folder versus the artwork. The folder has basically two colors. It's very graphic. It's almost like an advertisement. Whereas here you have a realistic design that is something you easily could have seen if you were strolling down this street in 1929 in the rain. So I'm going to zoom in so that you could see the work. And so it's interesting. I tried to put together a good group of works by Oda Kazuma that really showed the diversity of his artistry. So we started off with a rare trial print of a woodblock print published by Watanabe, a unique watercolor for a design that was then later produced in the 1930s. And this design, really shows the artist's interest in the city of Tokyo as the artist encountered it, not in an idealized way. So you see, again, these smokestacks and factories out behind the bridge here. And then moving back in time, this is a really early work for the artist, 1918, and it shows a wood engraving of a mountain, either at daybreak or in the moonlight. It's done in a way that it could either work in either interpretation. And the last print being one that he's most known for his lithography, and this is just a really quaint design from the late 20s showing Ginza, the main shopping and entertainment district of Tokyo. And so this kind of gives you a good sense of his body of work, his interests in the urban element of Tokyo, but at the same time being inspired by nature. And it's a nice group to consider when we're thinking of the how talented this artist is and the diversity of his body of work. So I want to thank you for joining me today at Woodblock Wednesday, and I look forward to joining, I look forward to presenting more on woodblock prints and paintings in the coming weeks. And if you haven't had a chance to visit my website, it is collectingjapaneseprints.com. I have a wonderful exhibition of night scenes. We also have a bookstore and a lot of other goodies there that I think you'll find entertaining and educational. And again, please join me next week. We'll discuss another aspect of woodblock prints and paintings produced by Japanese artists. So thank you again for joining me. See you next time.